Let me ask you something. What if the most dangerous weapon aimed at Britain during World War II wasn't a bomb? What if it was a 5-pound note? In the early 1940s, deep inside a Nazi concentration camp, Jewish prisoners with ink-stained fingers were doing something that should have been impossible. They were printing perfect British currency, pound for pound, indistinguishable from the real thing. So good that Swiss bankers accepted them without question. So good that the Bank of England, when they finally got their hands on samples, refused to admit the notes were fake. Not forged, not close, not good enough to fool most people, perfect. And the plan? Flood Britain with so much fake money that the pound would collapse, inflation would spiral, and British citizens would stop trusting the thing in their wallets. No invasion needed, no tanks rolling through London, just paper and panic. Genius or insane, possibly both. This is Operation Bernhard, the story of how Nazi Germany tried to destroy an economy with a printing press, and how the real damage wasn't done by the Nazis at all. Welcome to Money Never Learns. Let's go back to 1939. Germany is at war, and like every country at war, they need money, lots of it. But here's where Nazi thinking takes a particularly creative and catastrophic turn. What if you didn't just fund your own war machine? What if you destroyed your enemy's economy at the same time?
The idea wasn't new. Counterfeiting as a weapon of war goes back centuries. Napoleon did it. The British did it to the American colonies. But nobody had ever attempted it at this scale. The architect of the plan was an SS officer named Alfred Naujax. The man had a resume that reads like a villain origin story. False flag operations, political assassinations, staged border incidents used to justify the invasion of Poland. This was a man who treated reality as a rough draft. His original proposal was simple: print British pounds, enormous quantities of British pounds, then have German planes drop them over British cities. Just rain money on London. Citizens pick it up, spend it, more fake money flows into the economy, prices rise, trust erodes, the pound collapses from the inside. No artillery, no infantry, just chaos, delivered by gravity. Sound familiar? It should, because the weapon here isn't a forgery. The weapon is trust, and trust is the only thing money is actually made of. Here's where it gets worse. To pull this off, the Nazis needed printers, not just any printers, master craftsmen, engravers, watermark specialists, people who understood paper chemistry, ink composition, the microgeometry of official currency printing. These people existed. The Nazis knew exactly where to find them. They were in concentration camps. Jewish bankers, forgers, printers, and craftsmen, people imprisoned for being Jewish, were told they had one way to stay alive. One job: produce the most convincing counterfeit British pounds in history. Let that sit for a moment. The SS officer in charge of the operation, a man named Bernhard Kruger, for whom the operation was eventually named, actually understood that you can't torture skilled craftsmen into producing quality work. A rare flash of operational competence in an otherwise monstrous regime. The prisoners at Sachsenhausen concentration camp were given better food, their own barracks, access to tools. Not because the Nazis cared about them, because dead men don't engrave. The prisoners worked. They had no choice. And they were extraordinary at their work. Within months, they had cracked every security feature of the British 5-pound note. The watermark? Perfect. The paper composition? Matched. The serial number sequences? Correct and non-repeating. The ink? Chemically identical. By 1943, Operation Bernhard was producing notes that passed examination by professional Swiss bank tellers. Not amateurs, not tourists. Professional bank tellers. The Bank of England was being outprinted inside a death camp. But here's where the plan starts falling apart in a way nobody expected. The original idea, drop the money from planes, was quietly shelved. Why? Because by the time the forgery operation was producing notes at scale, the German Luftwaffe had largely lost air superiority over Britain. Dropping money meant losing planes. And it turns out, perfect fake British pounds are incredibly useful, even without a plane. Why bomb an economy when you can just spend your way through it? The operation pivoted. Instead of flooding British streets with fake pounds, the Nazis began using the counterfeit notes to fund actual intelligence operations, paying spies in neutral countries, buying weapons through intermediaries, funding operatives in Switzerland, Spain, Turkey. Wait a minute. The plan to destroy British trust in the pound became a plan to fund the Nazi war machine using British pounds that didn't exist. So now we have fake British money being used in real international markets, propped up by the trust built into the genuine British brand, to finance the regime that's counterfeiting it. Elegant, really. By the end of the war, Operation Bernhard had produced somewhere between 130 million and 150 million pounds in fake notes. In today's money, that's somewhere north of $9 billion, circulating in real markets, accepted, spent. The single largest counterfeiting operation in recorded history. Now here's the part that doesn't get told enough. The British found out. Not immediately, not all at once, but by the mid-war period, British intelligence had picked up enough suspicious notes through enough channels to understand that something serious was happening. The forgeries were circulating in the Middle East, in South America, in Switzerland. And the Bank of England's response? They kept it quiet. No public announcement, no press release, no warning to citizens. The official position was essentially, we see nothing unusual. Why? Because the moment you announce that millions of pounds in circulation might be fake, you've done the Nazis' work for them. The entire point of the attack was to destroy trust in the currency. Announcing we've been successfully counterfeited at massive scale would cause the exact inflation and panic the operation was designed to trigger. So the British government quietly absorbed the problem, acknowledged it internally, began quietly pulling suspicious notes, and said nothing. The Bank of England was so committed to protecting confidence in the pound that they refused to admit the notes were fake for years after the war. Some of the forged notes were so good that the bank initially classified them as genuine. Let that one land. The counterfeit was so perfect, the issuing bank said it was real. At the same time, and here's where it gets quietly uncomfortable, the British government, like every government fighting an expensive war, was also printing real pounds at a pace that was, let's say, ambitious. War spending, rationing, inflation suppression, the genuine currency supply was being stretched in ways that, in a different decade, would look a lot like the thing Naujoks was trying to do from the outside. The Nazis tried to inflate the pound through counterfeiting. The British managed to partially inflate it anyway, through legitimate channels. At least it was official. Now, the prisoners. As the war ended and German defeat became obvious, the SS ordered the destruction of all evidence. The printing plates, the machinery, the documents, and the prisoners. What saved most of them was geography and speed. As Allied forces closed in, the SS began moving prisoners westward, chaotically, without clear orders. Some were marched into the Austrian Alps. Some were shot. Some escaped in the confusion. A group of prisoners managed to dump the remaining counterfeit notes and production equipment into the Toplitz Sea Lake in the Austrian mountains before capture. Divers recovered some of the materials decades later. The lake still reportedly holds more. Several of the prisoner forgers survived. One, Adolf Berger, lived to write a memoir. His story was eventually made into a film, The Counterfeiters, which won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film in 2008.
The man forced to print Nazi propaganda under threat of death outlived the regime, won an Oscar for a film about himself. If history has any sense of style, that's it right there. So what's the lesson? Because there always is one, even here. Money is not gold. It's not paper. It's not a number on a screen. Money is a collective agreement, a shared story that says, this has value. That story works as long as enough people believe it. The moment they stop, the paper is just paper. Operation Bernhard understood this. It was, in a twisted way, a financially literate attack. They didn't try to steal British gold.
They tried to break the idea of British money. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. It almost worked. Not by flooding London's streets, by infiltrating real markets so quietly that the British government's only defensive move was to lie about it. The cover-up worked. The pound survived. But the structural damage, the notes circulating in international markets, the quiet inflation, the lost confidence in certain denominations, that lasted for years. The Bank of England eventually withdrew the old £5 note design entirely in 1945. Officially, modernization, obviously. Here's the thing nobody says out loud. Every major government in history has at some point debased its own currency, inflated it, stretched it, printed more than existed, sometimes in wartime, sometimes in peacetime, sometimes in panic, sometimes in policy.
The Nazis tried to do it to Britain from the outside, maliciously, with printing presses and a death camp. Every government has done a version of it from the inside, quietly, with printing presses and a central bank. The weapon isn't unique, it's just who's pointing it. Money is only as strong as the secret that protects it. And when trust is weaponized, inflation is always the fallout. Operation Bernhard ended in a lake in the Austrian Alps. The plates were dumped, the evidence sank, the prisoners scattered, and the world went back to trusting its currencies. Right up until the next time someone figured out you don't need tanks if you have a printing press and a plan. History doesn't repeat, but the playbook never changes. Most people will hear this story and think, that was a long time ago, that couldn't happen now. The mechanisms are different, the printers are digital, the currencies are electronic, but money still runs on trust, and trust is still, every single day, being managed and occasionally weaponized by people who understand exactly how fragile that agreement is. You're watching this, which means you're paying attention. That puts you ahead of most people. The subscribe button's right there. Money never learns, but maybe you can.